computer. Okay. And I was just trying to see if it was showing up on my computer, and it's not showing up right now. I don't know why it's not. It should be live. Um,
We are live. I see it. I see us
yeah.
on Facebook.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. Well, good evening, everyone. This is Attorney Robyn McCoy, and we have our premier attorney, Attorney Terrence Quinn, with us this evening. This is Robyn Legal, and Terrence and I have been talking about doing this for the longest time. So now I'm glad we're able to sit down and have this conversation about his path to becoming a lawyer and estate planning, things of that nature. So Terrence, I went to your website and I peeped you out and everything. You have some impressive things on there. I see you went to U of M undergrad and law school, which I went to U of M law school too. And you were a football player.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got a shoulder injury to show for it.
Right. Yeah. I was a runner. I got some stuff, injuries associated with running and dance, all that kind of stuff. So what motivated you to become an attorney?
People ask me that all the time, and I never have what I think sounds like a good answer. People just would tell me all the time I should be an attorney. They said I argued a lot, which I would argue against that and tell them I disagree. But then also a lot of my teachers would tell me I write really well. And so they said, you really should be a lawyer. And I didn't know any lawyers at the time, born and raised in Flint. I didn't know any lawyers at the time. And I said, well, why not? I don't know any. Why don't I do it? And just never looked back. I just went on and did it. So I know that's not too exciting, but that's really how it happened for me.
Okay, and I saw that you majored in English. And I mean, we know that they don't necessarily have a specific major for people who want to go to law school, but English is a good major to have because of what we do as lawyers as far as writing, reading, lots of reading, contracts, things of that nature. And so what motivated you? Like, I saw on your website, I see that you do estate planning, you do business formation. And so what motivated you to go into those specific areas of the law?
Yeah. So right out of law school, I was working on working at a big firm, a pretty big mid-Michigan firm, and doing some of everything, doing healthcare fraud and abuse litigation on the federal court level, no fault stuff, just all kind of civil and general civil litigation. And I realized, I said, I really got to figure out how I can get my own work. How can I get my own work in? And I said, well, what can I sell that everybody needs? I said, well, everybody's going to pass one day, so why don't I just do wills? I thought it was really easy. I thought it was just a matter of putting a name on the document, writing up what they wanted, where things would go. And I said, I can do that. Let me jump in. Well, I signed up for the ICL, Institute for Continuing Legal Education, 3-year course. They have a 3-year certificate program in probate and estate planning, and I found out pretty quickly that it wasn't as easy as I thought. But as I started meeting with clients at the end of every meeting, because of what we're dealing with, at the end of every meeting, people would say, they would do this sigh of relief, and they would say, I'm so glad that I got this done. And I never got that feeling when I was helping companies throw money at each other in court. I never got that feeling when I was supporting medical providers when they were being accused of things, fraudulent things from the healthcare fraud work. But when I was helping people plan what's going to happen to them when they're gone and their children and their stuff, what's going to happen to their stuff and their children when they're gone, as I was helping them plan what would happen to them if they were alive and couldn't make decisions for themselves. And then we would complete that process and they would know that things would happen just like they wanted it to happen. Consistently, I was seeing this sigh of relief, people of all ages. And that sold me. That told me this is where I'm supposed to be.
Okay, and then for our audience that's listening that are non-lawyers, what is a will and why is it beneficial to have a will?
Yeah, so let me start by saying that the topic of estate planning is a fancy term for just answering those two questions. What happens when you are gone to your stuff and your kids, and what happens if you're alive but can't make decisions for yourself? So the will is one of those documents that help you deal with the first question, which is what happens after you're gone. Everybody 18 and up really should have some kind of writing, and it shouldn't just be some kind, it should be done correctly, that says exactly what they want to happen to their assets when they're gone and who they want to be in charge of making sure that happens. The very basic way to get that done is by having a will done. And in a nutshell, that's what it is. But a will is really giving that information to the court. A lot of people don't realize that a will is, I didn't realize this till I took that 3-year course. A will is only a letter to the court saying what you wanted, who you want in charge of your probate case, as well as where you want everything to go. So that's a will. It gives your intentions on those two subjects.
Okay, and then why would it be beneficial for a parent to have a will?
Yeah. Parents desperately need to put a will in place, especially if you have minor kids. Let's start there. Parents of minor children, the will is the document where you identify who you would want to be guardian of your child. If you don't identify and say who you want to be guardian of your child, the court has to decide. And there are laws that the court follows or is supposed to follow to make sure that happens. But it's best, and everyone, including the court, wants you to have it written down who you want to be in charge. So first of all, that's the reason. But secondly, the will also directs how your assets will be used for the benefit of your kids. So if you don't have that in place, there are state laws that determine how that'll happen. And your will trump those laws and make sure it happens like you want it to happen. If you have parents of adult children, it's the same idea. What it will do is it will help you prevent any fighting among your kids. Because unless they can prove that your will wasn't done correctly or that you weren't in your right mind when you did it, what you have written in that will is probably going to stand. And so, the kids are going to waste their time fighting over stuff if they would fight.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I know my dad, shout out to Attorney McCoy, he does wills and trust and estates as well. And we've seen all kinds of, I'm sure you've seen it, situations when people don't have a will and they're fighting, and it's like a will can definitely, we see it can calm things down. Still people will, when a person passes, they can be excitable, but a will can definitely help you get your wishes out there, things of that nature. So why don't you tell us, what is the durable power of attorney for health or a living will, and why is it beneficial for a person to have that?
Yeah, so that's an extremely important document. That's a document that I don't even have to know what you own or know too much about you to tell you that you really have to get that done. That's a document where you're identifying who you will want to handle medical decisions for you if you cannot make decisions for yourself. So if you think about that, anybody watching this, if you think about, if you suddenly could tomorrow, and right now, don't think about your family or your mom, or think about yourself. If suddenly tomorrow you could not make decisions for yourself, who would talk to doctors? Who would tell the doctors which treatment to use? Who would be in charge of those decisions? And if you don't have a medical power of attorney in place, it's called a patient advocate designation or healthcare declaration. A lot of people refer to it as a living will. If you don't have that in place, the courts decide. And even bigger than that, people have to go to court. And that process of pursuing guardianship, which is the court's version of answering those questions when you don't have the DPOA, the medical power of attorney, on file, that's a process. That it's costly and it's just not fun. Your business is exposed in this public venue where your family has to explain what's wrong with you to convince the judge that you need somebody to care for you. And then secondly, they have to beg a judge to put them in charge. And sometimes they have to beg. And sometimes a judge just say no and put a lawyer in charge or a company. Okay. Well, if you have a properly drafted power of attorney in place, that won't happen.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing, it's a good preventative measure. And then I know from some of the durable power of attorneys, or you can express in there how, like, if you're, I'll put it this way, like my dad talks about if something happens to him, he wants to be on that he wants them to do everything they can, like cryogenics, like Michael Jackson, until they can to get him, bring him back from a coma or whatever it is. Whereas my mom is kind of more like, well, try what you can and then cut me off. If, you know, she doesn't want to be on life support for 10 years or something like that. So I know that they have that clause that you can express that, like how do you want to deal with that? Whether you want to, what kind of services do you want to have when if you're incapacitated?
That's right.
And so then also, can you tell the audience, what about a durable power of attorney for finances? What is that, and why is it beneficial to have that?
Yeah, that's equally important. Same idea. I don't really need to know what you have to tell you you need that. However, you have to put somebody in charge in the event that you can't handle money. So tomorrow, if you woke up and didn't realize that you couldn't handle any money for yourself, who would you want to be able to go into your bank account and write checks and all of that kind of stuff? You know, you really have to cover that. You still your bills still have to be paid. Your mortgage has to be paid. Your electricity, you know, all of that has to still be paid, and your costs for the care that you're receiving because you can't handle business for yourself. Somebody's got to write a check for that, whatever the insurance isn't covering. That's the purpose of that durable financial power of attorney. Is to appoint somebody similar to the healthcare power of attorney. If you don't have that financial power of attorney in place, somebody's got to go to court. They got to file for what's called conservatorship, not guardianship in this realm. Conservator handles the money. They have to file for that, and that's an even tougher process than the guardianship process. It's much more involved on an annual basis. So you got to get that financial power of attorney in place. Two things that everybody 18 years old and older have to put in place, period, is your financial power of attorney and your healthcare power of attorney today.
Okay. And then I know you do trust as well. And can you tell us what is a trust, and what situation would necessitate a trust when it comes to estate planning?
Yeah, so trusts are now dealing with kind of both categories. A trust deals with what happens after you're gone, as well as what happens if you're alive but need somebody to handle business to you. Now, earlier when we were talking about wills, I talked about how a will is really only a letter to the court. A lot of people think that once you've written your will out, that court doesn't have to happen. That's 100% false. A will is only for court. It's a letter to the judge. That's all it is. It has no value outside of court. So I have a lot of people to come in and they sit down and they say, well, you know what, Attorney Quinn, I need to do some planning, but all I need is a simple will. I don't have much. I just need a simple will. Half the people who come in, they say that. And then I ask them, oh, no problem. We can do a simple will for you. No problem at all. Let me ask you a question. Do you want your family to go to probate court after you're gone, or do you want them to avoid probate court? And they all say, well, I definitely don't want them to go to probate court. I want them to stay out of court. That's why I'm coming to you for a will. And I have to tell them the will is not the way to do that. In many situations, though not all, in many situations, the best way to avoid probate court is by having a trust created. And at its basic level, at its most fundamental level, that's the purpose of a trust, to avoid probate court, not the will. But the trust only avoids court if two things happen, and both of these have to happen. They're equally important. The first is the trust has to be built correctly, which is why it's not just important, but it's absolutely essential to use an attorney who specializes in trusts in estate planning. This is what they do. I've seen a lot of them that haven't been drafted correctly. But that's the first step. The second step, if you think of the trust as like a big bucket, step one is to hire an expert bucket builder to build the bucket properly.
Okay, such as yourself, you do that. So yeah.
That's right. Step two, though, is equally important. While you're alive and able, you have to make sure you properly connect everything that you own, or at least those assets that you want to go through your trust, to that bucket. The tricky is you don't want anything in your name after you're gone. You want it paying out automatically to people, or you want it paying into that trust bucket. So the bucket governs how it's distributed. If that's done, both of those steps are covered, then your family should stay completely out of probate court when you're gone. Great question.
Right. Okay. And then, so what if I have, let's say I have a home here in Michigan, and then I have a home, maybe I have a couple homes in two different states. Like and I come to you, how would you deal with that? Like, I have these properties and I want to leave the properties to my kids. Right. Like, how would I deal with that? How would you what would you do with that situation?
That is a fantastic question, because let me first talk about the horror story that's coming if you don't plan correctly in that scenario. So everybody wants to, I mean, everybody I talk to, they end up wanting to avoid probate court. So then I share with them, okay, you have property in Texas, you have property in, let's say, Florida, and then you live here in Michigan. Well, how are those properties owned? Well, they're owned in my name. Okay, cool. I got you. Now, first of all, we got to probably do some kind of trust, because what we need to do is make sure those properties are owned by your trust. And here's why. If you pass and those properties are still owned in Michigan and Texas and in Florida, not only is a probate court case going to be opened here in Michigan in order to transfer those properties, but you also have to open a probate case in Texas and in Florida. So now you have three probate cases. The Michigan one is the main one, but you have two sub probate cases in the courts in the counties down there. Who wants to run through three different states to deal with that? If those properties out of state are instead owned properly by your properly drafted trust, probate court should still be avoided, even though those properties are in other states. A lot of people don't realize that. That's a very important step to take, dealing with those properties out of state.
Okay, and then do you also, I know you said you do business formation, so when you're dealing with estate planning, do you counsel people about like how they manage their finances and how that would play into the estate planning?
Yeah, yes. So yes and no. So and I'll explain. So first, like let's use that client that you let's use you with the property in Texas and Florida, the hypothetical you just raised. So first of all, one of the things that I would also be looking at in addition to the trust and adding those properties to the trust, I'm not a big fan of putting property other than your home in the trust, and sometimes not even your home directly. And I know that sounds like that contradicts what I said earlier about putting stuff in the bucket, but we tie it down correctly. The other thing that I would at least have a conversation with you about with those other properties is putting those properties into some business entity that protects you from liability. So a lot of people own property, investment property, or rental property, or whatever, other than their home, and they own them in their personal names. And while this is not legal advice, most of my clients, I do advise them not to do it that way. And I explained to them that they should put those bit properties into some form of a business that protects them from liability. So that if a tree fell on somebody on the property and killed them, for example, the lawyer in that state won't sue them personally, or at least won't win a suit against them personally. They sue the LLC, and the LLC protects their personal assets. Now, when we get to other assets other than property, sure, I'm looking at retirement assets. I'm looking at life insurance. I'm looking at banking assets, everything that they own. I'm probably the one person in everyone's life who really does need to know everything that they own. I have to know all of it. And I'm looking at it, and when I see that there are places where they might be able to fill some gaps, maybe I see that it might make sense to get more life insurance. I don't sell any of that stuff. I don't invest for people, but I have, a catalog of people who I trust, who I vetted, that I will connect them to. So the life insurance agents, the bankers, the financial advisors who can advise them correctly and more specifically than I can. So yeah, estate planning is me looking at your whole world, looking at your family. It's me looking at all of your assets and finances and what you own. It's me I have to know a little bit about your health. I have to know the family dynamics. Are there, crazy people in your family
Right.
I need to know who's gonna show up when you pass. You tell me, yeah, this brother here, he's gonna show up, he's gonna try to take everything, and I don't want him to have anything. So when you pass and that brother does show up, I remember what you said, and I know how to approach that a little better. So yeah, I think everybody needs an estate planning attorney in their life, because we really help them make sure their entire situation is tied down correctly.
Okay, and if let's say I have a property and I put it in an LLC, but then I still want to leave it to my kids,
Yeah.
would I come to you and have you put that in the trust as well?
Yes. So what I do much of the time, not always, but what I do a lot of the time is I will then assign your interest in that LLC that owns the property to the trust. So the business is standing out here owning the property. protecting you from liability, but then it's tied to that trust bucket in a way where when you pass, your trustee then becomes in charge or empowered to deal with that LLC that owns the property. So then your trust will say what you want to do with that property. You want the property sold? Do you want it to stay in an LLC and let the family now own it? What do you want to do? The trust will govern all of that, no matter where in the country your property is.
Okay, and then when you've dealt with folks dealing with these issues, how have you dealt with issues with tax liens and trying to how to deal with advise them on how to deal with tax liens, things of that nature?
Yeah, I'm dealing with that right now. It's funny you asked that. I'm dealing with a situation like that right now that involves tax liens. And in those cases, we just have to look at what's going on with the lien, whose name that debt is in, if it was appropriately attached to the property. And then when we talk about the mortgage lien, a lot of times what I'll do and what a lot of people have to be careful of, your mortgage agreement on that rental property or whatever it is may say, if you transfer this property, they have the right to call that loan due. So they're meaning you got to pay it all now because you shouldn't have transferred it out of your name. So, we will turn over stones to make sure that won't happen in your world while we're also protecting you from liability and protecting your family from probate court. All of that goes into estate planning. Now, a lot of people try to do a lot of this stuff on their own. They'll try to go to Google or get a boxed kit from, Office Depot or something like LegalZoom or something like that. And I
Right.
think it's a terrible idea. I think it's a terrible idea. And not just because I want their business. I think aside from that, it's a terrible idea. When you think about all of these questions help people resolve what I think are two of the four most important questions everybody will deal with in one way or another. And I mentioned them already a couple of times. What happens to your stuff that you worked hard to build and your family that you love if you passed tomorrow?
Right.
With COVID, and I want to say I'm not trying to scare people, but I think we need to move forward. So if it takes scaring, then move forward because of that. The second question is, what happens if you can't make decisions for yourself, right? Those are extremely important questions that I don't think should be left to a $30 boxed kit or a Googled form. I don't think that's a good idea.
Right. No, I can tell you from, again, my domain, I'm more so, criminal defense,
Yeah.
family
Oh,
law.
yeah.
And what do they say? You have a full for attorney if you represent yourself in court. And then family law, like I see people trying to do stuff on their own and they make a big mess. And then they come to me after they've made a mess and they come to me to
Yeah,
fix it, do damage control. So
that's right.
yeah. And so I mentioned, I see that you do business formation. And so what does that usually entail? Like what do you do for people?
Yeah, so most of the time, most of the business formation that I do is associated with clients of mine, estate planning clients of mine who are starting businesses or have properties and things like that. Occasionally, I'll get a call from people who just want have a business set up in general, not because of estate planning. So I'm creating LLCs, creating corporations, creating C corporations and S corporations, then helping get them established and get them started with those businesses, doing contracts associated with those businesses as they're hiring people or as they're doing, they have different vendors or contractors that are going to provide services or products for them. So I'm doing those things as well. But more times than not, that business is is an extension of my estate planning business with clients who just have business interests or property that they own.
Right. I could definitely see that, we have folks out there that are doctors, nurses, teachers, first responders that definitely would, they're out there on the front lines and they definitely, it would be beneficial to I've heard about it in the news, people wanting to have all their affairs in order because unfortunately we have this global pandemic. I mean, even if it wasn't a pandemic, I think it's important for people to have, the basics: a will, durable power of attorney for health, finances, the trust if necessary, because it's just so, like you said, it's so messy if they don't have a will and if their people are fussing and fighting. You can try to alleviate some of that fussing and fighting that occurs, and so I definitely for those of you that are out there, you hear Terrence is out there, he's doing this work, and you need to call him up as soon as possible to have these issues addressed.
Right.
And so is there any other part of your practice that you do that you would like to share with the audience that you think that
Yeah, so a couple of things. So when we talk about fussing and fighting, that those fights end up being dealt with in the probate court process. So I'm also a probate attorney. So when people pass, a couple of different areas, when people pass without a plan in place, then their stuff has to go through probate court, like I said earlier. Or if people pass and all they have is a will, then their stuff goes through probate court much of the time. So when they need to go to probate court because they cannot access mom's house or bank accounts or whatever because of how things were set up originally, then we help them with that as well. We'll take them through that whole court process, which can take by rule at least 6 months and on average, but then it typically will be about a year. If people also are fighting over the will, or fighting over terms of the trust, that also is resolved by a judge in probate court. So we do the trust administration and the probate administration, which much of which will happen in the probate court process. Then, of course, when people need guardianship or conservatorship, like we talked about earlier, to either be in charge of somebody's medical decisions, housing decisions, or money, then that's probate court as well. Then the third, so my practice is broken into three main categories. You have the estate planning, which is my main deal, doing the wills, trusts, and powers of attorney. You have probate court, which is what I just described, going to court to help people with probate matters. But then the third category is elder law. So that's somewhat of a combination of the first two, but it's mostly helping people retirement age on up deal with everything I just talked about, plus much more. So any legal needs really that elders, people retirement age on up have, they can come to me and I can help them. A lot of people think elder law is only dealing with helping people get qualified for Medicaid for long-term care services. That's a big part of elder law, but it's not limited to that. And I do that as well. We just this week found out that we were successful in helping a wife get her husband qualified for Medicaid to cover his long-term care needs in a nursing home. So we do that as well, but it deals with much more identity theft, all types of things that can occur because of this. Our main goal is to help people put plans in place that will help alleviate all of the drama. And then if there is drama, help them go through it as simply as possible so that still what they want can be accomplished as best as possible.
Okay, and with the work that you do with the probate court, have you also worked on situations with maybe you have not necessarily somebody that's an older person, but like somebody that has mental health issues and maybe their family needs to become the guardian or conservatorship of them and have them placed in an adult foster home or something like that?
Absolutely. So mental health in two different ways. There's the mental health where someone is dealing with psychotic type issues or mental illness. We help people with that as well. But then there's the mental deficiency or cognitive deficiency, which is where they just may have Alzheimer's or some other form of cognitive dysfunction, where they can't take care of themselves. And then, yes, we do help them with all of that. And we do help. One of my clients, which I call the favorite client of the firm, he's been a client for a long time. I've helped him in all of these areas. We haven't had any probate matters, but I originally met him to do his plan. He owned a bunch of properties. I helped him get his properties into LLCs. I helped him set those businesses up correctly, did his trust and everything as he aged. He had a major identity theft issue. And over all these years, he's become a friend. He's a lot older than me, but he's become a friend of mine. A lot of identity theft issues. A family member was stealing from him. And now then we had to talk through selling the properties because it was getting to be too much for him to handle. So I walked him through all that process. Okay. And then more recently, he is in we helped him find and get secured in a nursing facility. And he's there. So
you guys do the whole package from the beginning to all the way up to helping people get in a nursing home and get all their affairs squared away.
That's right. Our job as estate planning attorneys, that's why I say I think everyone should have a real estate planning attorney in their life. We're with them through every phase, and we're their go-to. We're the first person they call. And if their nephew had a DUI, Robyn, I'm gonna put them in touch with you. So I know the people who they need, and it's my job to point them in those directions. But my other job is to help cover all of these things that are going to happen through their life. And then, if I survive this favorite client, then at whatever point he passes, I already know what I'm going to have to do because I know his family situation. And I'm going to have to walk that whole family through some drama, but also just the trauma of having lost their family member and whatever comes of that. So yes, we're there for the whole life cycle of their estate and their life situation.
Okay, what about if you have someone that has mental health issues and maybe they would qualify for Social Security disability? Do you help
Right.
with that?
We do. We help with Social Security disability. And then we help make sure their assets are situated such that none of the governmental benefits that they have will be negatively impacted because of the assets that they have. And there's so much that goes into that because we also have to make sure whoever is leaving them something from their will or trust is not leaving it in a way that'll disqualify them from their governmental support. So yes, we help with the SSDI, the SSI, we help with veterans benefits. Um, you
Happy
know,
Veterans Day to the veterans.
that's
Shout out to
right.
the camp.
That's
Happy
right. Happy
Veterans
Veterans.
Day.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for your service.
Yes.
Right. But yeah, we do all of that. Still, to me, falls within the estate planning and the elder law combined, and so it's a very specific area, which you really have to pay attention to what's going on because there's a lot that could go wrong if you didn't cross every T and dot every I.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. I didn't know that you guys did the veteran benefits. And then as I said, I've had some clients I should be sending right on over to y'all that need to get help with Social Security disability because they definitely need to get it together. I mean, they definitely, I would feel from what I've seen, they would qualify.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
uh
Okay. Good. Mhm.
so yeah, so did you have anything else that you wanted to share with the audience about what your practice and
Just maybe a couple of warnings for people. So what we see a lot, we see people working to cut corners. Just today, I had a conversation with somebody. People working to cut corners. Instead, they're so concerned about paying an attorney to do this stuff and how much that's going to cost that they try to cut corners. And this is not the area to cut corners. So what they'll do in a lot of cases, they'll add their child or whoever on their bank account, so the child can handle money for them if they can't handle money themselves. And so that when they pass, the money goes to the child, and they want the child to divide everything up evenly. That's a great idea until you talk to me. I think it's a terrible idea. I always tell people in workshops that I do, never, and this is just a general statement, might make sense in your case, never add anybody to any assets of yours other than a spouse. And I even say maybe with your spouse. My wife's on all my stuff,
right?
but you got to be careful with that.
Shout out to Adrian. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Couple of reasons why. Number one, that person that you add could take everything. When you add them as a joint owner on the property or on the bank account, let's talk bank accounts, that child could withdraw all the money out of that account.
Right.
Now, people laugh and say, oh, my daughter would never do that. Are you sure? I've seen it happen, even when they thought
Like
it would.
trust. You got to be able to trust them. Yeah.
That's right. But they say we added the good child. We didn't add the bad child to the account. So if that's the case and that child would never do that, the second reason might be more in your situation. If that child had a creditor, that joint owner had a creditor, that joint owner could come in there and take that money out that account as well.
Oh, now you made me think. You making me think about the child support situations that a lot of the brothers have with
There
their
you go.
accounts. Yeah.
There you go. That's right. That's exactly right. So there are other reasons as well, but those are just two. Another way, another category of people or a situation that people really need to be specific about how they plan is blended families. So you're in a family where mom and dad have kids, but none together, but they both have their own set of kids from previous relationships. That scenario, even if everybody loves each other, it's set up to have a conflict later at some point in time. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't get married if it's blended, but I am saying if they're in a blended situation, blended family situation, they got a plan. Mom passes, dad gets all the assets. Dad passes, all the assets go to his kids. What happened to mom's kids? Now they're looking over here and they're mad. Or when mom passes, her kids are looking at dad because they think that he should share with them, and so it can be chaos. It's chaos waiting to happen.
Right.
So those are just a couple. Special needs families need to plan, and then even in your area of work, Robyn, when we look at single parents of minor children, a lot of them are shocked when they realize that that other parent, if they didn't like them, let's just say that, for example, they're mad, they hate the other parent, and the last thing that they want is for their kids or assets to go to that other parent if they passed. Well, like I know, if they pass, and maybe you can correct me, maybe I'm wrong. If they pass, most likely the other parent is going to get their child unless it's proven that they're unfit to parent,
Right.
right? Yeah, this is your area, so correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct.
Yeah, but then they had life insurance and they had money that they had available for that child, and the child is the beneficiary. Well, the court's not going to give that money to the child because they're a minor. You know more about that than I do, maybe.
Right.
But probably that other parent is going to be in charge of handling that money. So the single parent of a minor child has to put a plan in place. One, to make sure the kids go where they want them to go. They're going to go to the other parent,
They
but
gonna
just
go. I know. Yeah, they will.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. But then secondly, so the money can be managed in the way and by the person that they want. Then lastly, and I'll stop, when that child, if the money did go through the court system for that child and is managed by the other parent, when that child turns 18, that child is an adult, and he or she could, probably will, be able to take whatever is left of that money. Now, when I was 18, I was pretty mature, running around Ann Arbor. But if you had left me $5,000, $50,000, $500,000, I'd have had a good time on campus because I wasn't mature enough to think through it correctly. If you plan correctly, you can make sure that money is distributed and managed and then distributed for them in the way you choose. So the point is, blended families need to plan. Um, Parents of minor children, parents of people with special needs, got a plan. Joint ownership almost always is a bad idea. Um, the moral is you really got to see an attorney who does this work.
So what you're saying is if I have friends that are single moms. So you're saying they'll come to you, you'll do the will, and then if they, obviously they can express if something happens to the parent, the father, who else they would want to take care of their child. But if they have money, you can help them to create a trust and designate, maybe they have a sibling or a parent that they would have over that trust, as opposed to having the father be the
100%. That's exactly right. And even if their assets and their wishes don't tell me that they should have a trust, meaning for me to recommend a trust, even if we're not doing that, I still can help them arrange things in a way where what they want will be accomplished. So I don't know how else to say it other than they have to meet and plan because it could be a complete disaster if they didn't.
Right. I mean, I definitely think that there's a need for estate planning, especially if you have kids. You could see it when kids that have issues and that blow money while you're alive. And then if you don't put things in a proper, set things up properly, then they could just blow all the inheritance money, and they wouldn't even be able to take care of themselves or their other siblings. I've seen that happen all the times where some family members say, oh, so and so took the inheritance and blew the money and now there's nothing left.
Yeah. I love my kids. Adrian and I love our kids. We think they're wonderful. They're great kids. Don't give us any problems. We believe that we'll raise them to be very mature. They are not, if we pass while they are minors, they are not getting everything when they turn 18. We have a trust created, and our trust appoints somebody that we trust to manage money for both of them. When we pass, their stuff splits into a pot for each of them. And the money in their pot is used to take care of them while they're growing up. including paying for college if necessary. Our life insurance and everything pays into that trust. And then at certain ages, mid 20s, around 30, mid 30s, they get lump sum distributions
Mhm.
that will just go into their hands. So that way we're taking care of them while they're growing up, but also distributing their assets to them at intervals that we think they'll need them and can handle it appropriately. You gotta take care of them. You gotta take care of them in that kind of way. And that's another, by the way, benefit of a trust that you can't really do with a will only unless the will directs that a trust be created. So you gotta do it.
Got to do it.
Mhm.
Right. What is it? They say Benjamin Franklin said prevention is worth an ounce of the cure.
That's
So
right. That's
so what
right.
we're talking about, this is some preventative work that is definitely beneficial to everyone. So okay, so Terrence, I want to thank you for coming out and answering these questions. I know we're going to be reversed tomorrow because
Yeah,
we've got a program at 7 o'clock where we'll be talking
right.
about the kids and with the school officials, myself, and talking about dealing with COVID and educating your kids, parenting, things like that. So
How's school going right now? That's right.
right. How's everybody surviving? Yeah, I had a class yesterday with some of my students at EMU.
Mhm.
So okay, so everybody, thank you for tuning in. This will be on Facebook, YouTube, and my website. You probably see it on Terrence's website as well.
Mhm.
Everybody have a blessed evening. And again, thank you, Terrence. This is Attorney Terrence Quinn, who is an expert in estate planning, business formation. You heard him, probate, all of the above. So, and if Terrence, if somebody wants to check out more about what you do, what's your website? What's the best way to reach you?
Yep. The website is tgqlaw.com. Again, that's tgqlaw.com. And Robyn, thank you so much. This is wonderful. This was fun. And thank you so much for this time.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we did this because, as I said, knowledge is power. It's definitely people need to know this, especially with these during these times. It's just better to have everything laid out as opposed to, God forbid, a person dies, they don't have a will, and everything is just it's messier than it could be. So,
That's, that's right.
right,
That's right.
okay. Well, I will see you tomorrow.
All
So,
right.
thank you.
Thanks, Robyn.
Okay.